let's move in to the next segment. So essentially, the last piece of for the night, and this is our chess theory review. What we've done so far, if you haven't been paying attention, and if you have, great, thank you for joining us for the last like 3 months. It's taken me almost 3 months to go through this, but essentially, my theory was, and what I really wanted to do is compare chess to X-wing, which is a comparison I made in the past. And it was a big contention between actually one of the first original hosts and myself when we both first started playing X-wing, because I felt Star Wars Destiny was better than X-wing. So we won't get into that because I don't want to ruffle a million feathers and have 100 pounds of hate mail. But we decided to do a discussion on like how does chess theory relate to X-wing, and I say this because chess to some extent has not changed, right? How many hundreds of years has chess been played, and the rules are static. But people love chess like a lot.
Me too. Yeah.
People play a lot of chess. And I think if you're a good chess player, you're probably a good X-wing player. That would be my theory. And chess has no list building. There's no list building. You don't even have like that complexity piece to it per se.
It's like, oh, 6 queens, nerf.
I don't need anything else. Just 6 queens. Oh man, checkmate in 4 moves. There you go. Talk about a quick game. I'm gonna spend 10 minutes per move. You're gonna watch me just sit there while my clock runs down. Anyway, so but I feel the principles of chess and how much strategy actually goes into it is a reason why I compare it to X-wing and why we're kind of doing the series. So at the beginning we defined it, then we kind of defined what our pieces are, how the pieces relate to in-game, our in-game X-wing theory. We determined there's very few kings. Boba and Vader are kind of kings, and that's partially because if you kill them for the most part, you've won the game. Mm-hmm. Except for when Boba acts more like a queen, and then it doesn't matter because he still lives, and then the camp still win. But anyway, so we talked all about the beginning, opening theory, opening maneuvers, all those other things. Now this piece is mid game, right? So this is your middle game. That's what they call it. And in chess theory, they define it very broadly by saying middle game begins when chess players have moved their king safely and developed most of their major pieces. So essentially, it's once you have your setup, you get your openings, you get all of your space allocation correct, and you're ready to go and ready to pounce. That's when middle game starts. The huge thing about middle game is that there is not technically one specific period of defined time. And I think this applies to X-wing. We have our setup, right? We know when opening happens, right? We have our setup, we have our opening maneuvers. Usually now it's at least 2 turns because you can't take objectives till the second turn. So unless you 5 straight boost for like an alpha strike type thing, like in a very aggressive alpha strike, you're not murdering anything round 1. Unless you're me, and I just like to sometimes throw Grievous 5 straight and get shot at and lose half points right away. It's happened to me a couple times. And so middle game, there is kind of several important pieces, right? There's some very important facts, some different pieces that go into it. But before we kind of get into those and go through each one of those and talk about them, what I'm going to do is open the floor up to Nick and to George to say, okay, hey, as we define and talk about middle game and X-wing, what are some of the tenets or some of the highlights you feel go into middle game? And we'll go ahead. We'll start with George.
What are some of the highlights that begin middle game?
Yes. So like when you're doing your stuff, do you have like a specific time that you feel stupid computer? You have a certain time that you feel middle game starts for you?
Well, with the list that I've been flying lately, I think that's when when Grievous gets in a position of flanking, that's when my middle game starts. So like it's usually that around 3rd round, I would say I have him in a good position where he then begins to play his game. So that's kind of what I focus on, where my mid game is, and depending on how many objectives I have or whichever scenario we're playing, it's based on that. But yeah, mostly when Grievous is in the position.
All right, Nick, for you, how about middle game? When do you feel middle game starts for you?
So it's the first 1 or 2 rounds of X-wing where people are kind of jockeying for position. Still, they're making barrel rolls, boosts. They're making like course corrections, I would call it, identifying a lane and then maybe course correcting if they see that that lane is closed or they need to go somewhere else. The middle game for me starts when you can no longer course correct and you've picked the lane and the avenue of approach for your list. That means that your engagement has basically been determined as to the simple like main areas to where it's going to happen. So typically, you might 2 or 3 straight in front of what I do this a lot. I'll corner a ship and then I will 3 or 4 or 5 straight right in front of an obstacle, and then I'll choose to do a barrel roll one way or another. That is the first course correction, and then I'll have one more turn to be able to do that. And then at that point, I've locked in my middle game, and I've decided this is where I want to and feel like I should engage. And you gotta be really careful once you've locked in that final answer, because that's gonna determine the game. That is, the middle game is the game. So,
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. It's that point of no return. like you've already locked in to
yeah,
going in this direction, and that's where you're going basically.
yeah, because you can't be using actions.
Mhm.
For scenarios are interesting, but you can't be using actions to reposition when you're getting shot at. You just have to have mods, and that's exactly. You've locked it in. You can't really afford to do a third course correction.
Yep. So in chess theory, they call that centralizing your pieces. That's what they call it. So essentially, it is once you get your pieces set up and ready to go, and what can you control? So in Nick's case, when he's talking about his Luke, is what he's talking about.
I
And
play other factions, but sure.
Yeah, sure. I've only ever seen you play Rebel, so I'm gonna
Well,
pick on. I get to
only
pick
seen
on
me
you a
play
little bit.
You can pick on
So.
me a little bit, but I am captain of TG, so you better watch it.
That's fine. You can bench me, baby.
Really can't afford to bench you, Tanner.
But anyway, so the so I'm gonna pick on Nick because again, it's a Luke thing, right? So Luke's gonna come in and like he says, he's gonna go through. Does Luke want to go in the center, or can Luke go on the outside, right? And then once he makes his decision, is Luke gonna go through the center? He then decides where his targets are gonna be, right? So he knows that if Luke does a 3 bank, he's gonna be able to do the target lock. He's gonna be able to get a focus if he needs to, or if he really absolutely has to, he might be able to barrel roll to get out of arc. So if he comes in at a Grievous and here's Grievous, if he decides to Grievous is flanking somebody else and here comes Luke could be flanking Grievous, right? And now we're talking about where your centralized pieces are. When we talk about knights control a lot of space on the board. Like, in fairness, knights are one of the biggest pieces in chess. Even though we talked about in X-Wing, what is a knight, right? Like, what is that knight? And if you go back 5 episodes, we talk about that. We define what that knight is and how it works. So anyway, centralizing your pieces, determining your lanes, figuring out where is the best approach for your different engagements. I will tell you, a lot of people like to split their lists up into 2 sections and tell you which one do you want to play against, especially when you have a 4-ship list where they are somewhat self-sufficient on their own. X-Wings are... I hate saying this, but X-Wings are really good at that. You do not need to fly 4 X-Wings in formation. You do not need to do that. That is not something that is required. X-Wings will die, but they also get to live on their own. So a lot of times you'll see 2 of them loosely together. The one caveat in Rebels would be Jake, right? Jake's got to be by somebody, or he's only giving himself the focus.
It just doesn't really work.
So, yeah. So that's why Jake, like I would have said in 2.0, Jake was undercosted. But now in 2.5 with all the new rules, really Jake is like, I don't think I want to see Jake go to 3 points, but at 4 points, Jake is almost just an overcosted, like, coordinating ship. Like, that's really what it is. He's just
an A-wing. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, there's that too, but he's just like at 4 points, it's really hard because if you lose him, that's 4 points of your list. If he was 3 points or 2 points with no loadout, you would probably take Jake all the time because you can afford to put him with another ship to lose him if needed. Same way as I don't feel like killing Jake unless he has prockets on him is the biggest problem ever either. Like, I stopped trying to kill Jake anyway. Finn, on the other hand, you want to kill Finn because Finn just wants to live and ruin your life, and Finn is your knight specifically in that type of scenario. All right. So the next tip, the next things is talking about what are you willing to trade, right? So they talk in chess, they talk about trading your flanking pawns for your central pawns. In X-Wing, that's a little bit different, right? There's a little bit of a difference because we don't always have a lot of pawns on the table. We just don't. So really in X-Wing, when I relate it to flanking and centralized pieces, it's really what are you willing to trade? What are you willing to leave off the table? So when we talk about engagement here, and I'll pick on George a little bit because George says he brings his Grievous into flanks. What if they target Grievous? Are you willing to trade your Grievous for other ships? Or are you going to run away with Grievous? And
No, I'm going to run away.
You?
I'm going to tuck my tail and run.
I don't do that. But I do that sometimes, in fairness, but not every time. Ask Nick, because I gave him my Grievous the other day.
You didn't, though. That was the problem.
Well,
you did, but you
wasn't for
kind of did, and you did. Yeah, exactly, right.
That wasn't for lack of trying. Let's put it that way. So when we talk about trading our pieces, to you guys, we'll start with Nick this time. What do you feel is a worthy trade in terms of once we get into that actual engagement in our middle game? What are you willing to trade, up or down?
Sure. Let's talk about in the scope of scenarios. A trade for me, I'm willing to trade down when I have, let's just say, scramble. I have 2, 3 of the points. That's half of my ship, right? That's my pilot. That's a 6-point pilot. Let's say Luke, because we're using Luke, as a lot of examples. That's half of that, so that you can you have a buffer there. That 6-point loss, even though it affects the total score, is really a 3-point loss just on its own as an isolated incident. However, you have to look towards your next turn. What can you do if, for example, I had a game of Gen Con where I was behind by quite a bit, but I saw 3 or 4 different ways. Each turn I saw one way that I could get back into the game, and I executed it and I won. And it's, what does the next turn look like? Do I have a good shot? Do I have that double modded shot? Do I have 2 shots coming into the ship that I need to kill? Where is my win condition going to be on the board for the next turn? So looking into the future, you trade down. Trading up is like what most people do with Wedge, is they say, this is a ship, Boba Fett, for example, Wedge with plasma torpedoes, double modded into Boba Fett. I am going to get rid of this nightmare with the one ship that can actually reduce the amount of dice that he can roll. And no matter how many rerolls and mods he gets, he's only going to get 1 die to roll. Trading up, you throw that ship or that pilot at somebody that you identify that your win condition starts with that trade. And then you play on the rest of the game without it, knowing that you had that game plan, that you're like, this is a ship that, sure, it's going to die, but your opponent can't really do anything about the fact that it's going to try to trade with them. Like, that's what Wedge does, especially with torpedoes. So, yeah.
Fair enough. How about you, George? What is trading your ships mean to you? And if you want, you could trade me a few ships. I like free stuff, so.
That's a tough one. I do the balance of like trading, damage for damage, or sometimes in your case, like you're saying, chips for ships. I generally try to stay away from that, but if it comes down to it, I'm gonna throw at you, the obvious bait, like a smaller point, 2-point ship, in front of you, and see what you do with that. Like, I'm willing to often trade a ship for objectives sometimes as well, because I value me personally. I value the objectives over my ships sometimes, my 2-point ships.
Yeah, it's like trading for scenario action, right?
Exactly, because at the end of the day, like, it's also dependent on their positioning. If I know they're not going to be able to recapture it the next following round, then I've already gained an advantage there as well. So
yeah,
it's kind of like that.
That's huge. That's the biggest thing. Yeah, is where your opponent is on the board. It's like, great, you can't scramble anything for a turn. That's 3 points for me here and next turn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So the next point that they have is avoid pawn weaknesses. They say avoid doubled, backward, and isolated pawns. Again, this one is a little bit harder to relate to X-Wing in the aspect of we don't have a lot of pawns unless you fly Separatist or Empire. Or hell, at this point, I guess if you fly Resistance Y-Wings and you have
Yeah,
seven,
that's a
six
pawn
ships,
all day.
they're
That's a
just
pawn.
freaking. They're fancy pawns. They're really good pawns, you know.
Mhm.
But anyway, like this one's a little bit different where we talk about weaknesses. How do we avoid in-game trouble, right? And so I'll pick, you know, I'll pick I've been running George's list and blah blah blah. That's one of the things when you talk about trading, right? So in Scramble, if I dump a droid with a Discord missile and I've got 2 ships coming in, I'm throwing the Discord missile away. The probability that I'm going to use both calculates on defense and live is probably pretty slim, especially if they're coming in with a proton torpedo. That is just like, here, have your Discord, because that 1 damage and this or the scenario action is worth it over losing that ship. But what does that do for in-game? So when you run a 5-ship list, if I lose 3 ships in 2 rounds, even if my other 2 ships are queens and and rooks, that's not good. 1 queen and 1 rook is not going to win you the game. In Nick's case, with his 4-ship rebel list, if you trade Wedge for half a Boba, but you lose all of Wedge in 1 round, that's not a good trade, right? And that's when we talk
Depends on
about
what kind of half. Or is Boba on like 2 hull or 3 hull, or a torpedo can solve that? Yes, but I agree with you. Yeah, if he's only taken 1 damage card or something.
Yeah, the most Wedge is going to get on that is the 4 shields, right? But
or with a plasma 4 damage,
Yes.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So the issue though runs into is if you lose Wedge that first turn, it's not as much about the trade that you did. It's about what's going to happen in your end game. So avoiding weaknesses to maintain your end game is the biggest issue there, right? So George, what do you feel when we talk about weaknesses? And again, this isn't do trading, but just weaknesses in your positioning, right? How do you solve or how do you work towards not allowing something like that to happen?
Spacing, right? Like, so you want to make sure that Wedge is in a position where like he could shoot at Boba Fett, but not getting shot from everybody else. Like avoiding getting shot from his entire list is how you avoid that situation, so that you don't lose Wedge on the first turn, like you said.
Mhm.
Nick, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if we're sticking with just the Wedge example, I mean, I guess I'll go broader here. A ship will feel like a pawn when it's left out to dry. So this I think what you mean, or this part of the chess theory, you know, was this number 3, is leaving a ship out to dry, whether it be it not participating in a crucial engagement because it's too far away, or it's being too far away from friendlies that could back it up and it gets pounced on. So we've all played plenty of games where somebody has set up. I mean, honestly, I'll just use the Gen Con game I had against Will Hagwood. Like, great player, amazing player, great list, the double Decies and 3 TIE fighters. He decided to have Morna Key on the opposite side of the board and have to spend 3 turns coming in to participate. And that was enough time for me to kill Oiken completely. And he had Morna, who I don't know if we would, you know, Morna's kind of like a quasi knight bishop in that list. She was a pawn because she wasn't participating. She was kind of left out to dry when she needed to be there. And so it's just, if someone's going to pounce on your ship, like if Boba's going to roll in and get into range 1 of you, he's going to be taking 2 or 3 more brutal shots because you got company, right? So you have to make your opponent think twice about being reckless or just throwing themselves at you. If you have a ship all the way off on the other side of the board and there's people 5 straightening towards you, it's too late. Your friends are not going to get there in time.
Yeah, they're gone.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of ties into number 4, which is avoiding creating weak spaces in your position because it creates issues in the end game. Creating weak spaces is essentially giving your opponent the advantage. So an example of that would be a shattering shot, trick shot Luke, who does decide to go through the center because that's where all the bloody asteroids and debris clouds are. And you stick 1 lone droid on an asteroid, it's gone. Like, Luke's gonna go yum 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 yum, and then you just lost that center objective, right?
He might not even take a lock. He might not even shoot a torpedo. He could just take a focus.
Yeah,
exactly. That's all he's gonna do. He's definitely not taking a lock on a 2 agility ship, no thank you. Um, anyway, but so avoiding giving your opponent positions that benefit them, right? So they talk about it as an outpost. Is kind of how like chess theory talks about it. Is do not give your opponent an outpost for them to camp at. And like in one of the examples that they had was, basically if you move a pawn and that knight now all of a sudden only had 2 positions, now he has 3 positions. And now that knight can not only threaten a rook and let's just say a queen or a rook and a bishop, it can threaten a 3rd piece or set itself up to force you to go kill it. And then we all know if you kill a rook or a knight, but you haven't killed the bishops and the rooks, at some point that's not going to benefit you. You're going to lose. You're going to lose because they're going to be better suited to take care of your list or your chess list. So not having essentially a opening of bad positioning is kind of the same thing.
Don't allow yourself to be put into a kill box.
Yeah.
That's the big thing in chess is when your piece gets pinned, you have to move another piece because if you move that piece anywhere, you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I think and I'll pick on JJ a little bit because sometimes when I play JJ, like when you run Kira, you become predictable, right? If you target lock a cloud, I know you're going to do one of 2 things. You're going to run away or you're going to go through that cloud. Your position is sold. Like we know where you're going. So like Kira at 2 points, right? People love to use her in Scum because I could just barrel roll through clouds. Well, if you're Eamon, you probably don't want to just do that. Good barrel rolling through that cloud means if I know you're going to be there, there's Discord's going to be waiting. Maybe a proxy mine if I'm smart and able to get my droid up there fast enough. All sorts of different things.
Just got to add barrel roll to Iman's action bar, and we're
No.
golden.
No.
Well, you were saying that Iman barrel rolls. I'm like trying to think about how he could barrel roll.
No, sorry. Did I say barrel roll? I didn't mean barrel roll.
Boost. You meant
Yes.
boost.
Yeah.
Gotcha. X-wing right here.
Well, I'll tell you what. If Eamon ever barrel rolls on your table and you don't think twice about it, I guess. I mean,
yeah, I have
don't
some
know what
other
to say.
problems. I should resign as captain of Tinder Gods.
Yeah. Like if I ever pull that maneuver on you. The next one that they talk about is always blockade your opponent's isolated pawn with a knight. So, Nick, in X-Wing, what does that mean to you?
It's less about like a physical piece, like a physical pilot, and more about if your opponent decides to engage with you. And basically creating a choice that your opponent has to make, that however they engage with you, there's going to be some sort of caveat that you are supplying to that engagement. Like, okay, so if you turn in on me here, I've got 2 more shots coming into you, double modded or whatever. You've made the decision, you're going to pay the price for doing this. Or if you put them in a position where if they run away, you're getting free target locks, you're flanking them, you're capping objectives that they can't respond to. So basically, again, it comes down to not leaving something out to dry, making your opponent make a decision that isn't going to just be a freebie decision that has no consequences.
Yeah, I agree. Like lose-lose situation. You put your opponent in a lose-lose situation, basically.
Yeah.
Either way, you're capitalizing on it.
Like a Chewbacca. You can shoot at him, he shoots at you twice. You shoot at another ship, he shoots at you twice. Pick what you want. You want to get hit twice?
Yeah.
It used to be dash. Oh, nobody cares about obstacles. Just gonna come kill you. Thank God.
Yeah,
dash
people.
doesn't exist.
I mean, that was Zach Matthews' list was playing Chewbacca. We had it on stream. If you guys are curious, you can watch it back. But on our VODs, but Chewbacca got ignored the whole game, which might be the right play. But like, you just gotta shoot at that thing and just kill it. Just gotta kill it with fire.
Yeah, because that's what in my game with Staniszewski, I think it was the same list. I think that was the exact same list, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, but instead of like Jarek, I don't know if he had Jarek or anything in Staniszewski's list.
I think
no, he didn't.
Was it Kaz or Jarek?
Yeah, I have Kaz in the thing.
Okay, it was it was Kaz. That's right. I'm sorry. I saw Jarek earlier in a list similar to that, and I got confused.
Well, Jarek would be if you wanted to upgrade Finn to something else. So when Finn goes up to 4 points, you're gonna have to use Jarek instead of Kaz. Anyway, That's my hot take on why I hate. I'm sorry, I hate Finn. That Finn
It
is
makes no
my.
sense. It literally makes no sense. Why
He
he's
is
so good.
just the worst. He is a negative play experience, and then I don't care what anyone says. Corey.
Is it worse
Corey.
than Torkoal though?
Right now it is. I don't know. What does Torkoal even run right now? 4 points? He can't take
Yeah.
Moldy Crow anymore. So
No.
Yeah.
like as soon as he lost Moldy Crow, Torkoal became less of a issue. And I'll be honest, like in this new meta where you have to take objectives versus just murdering, Torkoal kind of lost some of my hatred towards him. I don't like seeing Torkoal, I'll be honest with you, but I don't get as jaded without him. I mean, because he has to, with the Moldy Crow, he didn't have to pick. It
Yeah.
was like a mini boss. That was the problem.
Torkoal's
Yeah.
the same price as Sarasu. It's like I don't know. I'd rather have Sarasu all day, and she gets a Pro Torp. So
Exactly. And Sarasu's not likely to just die in 1 or 2 engagements. Sarasu's going to contribute. Putting somebody at I0, like before it was a pain in the ass because you know how hard it is to avoid a 180 arc, especially when it's like side to side,
Mhm.
Yeah.
That was just really hard. But anyway, everybody likes to pick on me. That was just so you know, Nick, that was the first ship I ever hated in X-Wing. Like
we all
And-
have our first. Yeah.
yeah,
I
that-
think
that-
the only answer to him was just having 2 ships, or you could only pick one. The other one could still try to initiative kill or do some work. But
Yeah.
it sucked. That was Torkoal Swarm was one of my least favorite lists to go up against as well. It was just a joke.
Yeah, I hate them. Anyway. So the next one is occupy open files with your rooks. So essentially an open file is basically like a straightaway, right? And so like when we talk about Grievous and you're basically, this is just your lanes, right? This is your opening lane. This is where you want your big heavy hitter to go. Because we know rooks are very, very good. In chess, you don't just trade a rook for anything. Rooks protect your king, and then rooks can become very aggressive. And if you could keep a rook 2 in game, you have a higher probability of winning. Unless, I guess, if it's just your king and 2 rooks versus their king and 2 rooks. I don't know how that would happen, but I guess it could happen. I don't know. I've never played a game in chess where I've ended with my rooks. Most of the time I lose at least 1, if not 2 of them. But I'm not super great at chess. We'll just put it that way. Anything on that about lanes, guys? Or files is what they call them. Files. That's the stupidest name I've ever heard.
Just pick the right lane.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between being a great X-Wing player and being a great chess player is that, like, I feel like you can be a great chess player and be one of the best X-Wing players, but you can't be one of the best X-Wing players and be one of the best chess players, right? Like, the biggest difference to me is that the greatest chess players are reactive and have everything planned out several moves in advance. And then X-Wing player, you can win by just being reactive in X-Wing, which is not an easy thing to do. There's a lot more depth to X-Wing in terms of like all upgrades, dials, obviously things you can't do in chess, but that's kind of the biggest difference that I see, is that X-Wing is mostly about being reactive every turn and not thinking more than a turn in advance, because it's kind of hard to do beyond that in a lot of cases.
Fair enough. And the last part of middle game that they talk about is keeping the bishops in a pair, right? That your bishops together are some of your most valuable pieces, and they normally are locked up by knights, right? But if you're able to move them and get them together, they can be more powerful and more strong than some of the other pieces on the board that are left. And so that's when we talk about in X-Wing, right? When we get to that middle game, we get past that first engagement, get past the second engagement. What do you have left? So to me, keeping the bishops in a pair is, what do you have left? And can you keep enough firepower to either take over the scenario actions with your 6 A-Wings, or kill things with your Wedge and Luke? Or I guess Jango Fett, if you so like Jango Fett's like a two bishops and one.
Jango
horrible.
is a every piece, major piece.
Yeah.
I hope they don't touch Django. Ugh, that would be sad. Sad day.
They don't need to.
They'll touch Notorious though, which is touching Django.
I'm okay with that. I'm actually
Yeah.
okay with that.
Yeah, I'm ready for that card to burn, man.
Yep. Let's lower Django a point and take Notorious away. How
No,
about that?
no.
Oh gosh.
Got him. What did you call me?
Ideas.
Point Satan? Is that was that
Yeah,
what my
yeah.
nickname
Point
was?
Satan. Your Point Satan. Yeah, you have some terrible ideas. All of your ideas involve Separatists being way too good, like Tri-Fighters at 2 points.
Hey,
2 point. Give me a 2-point Tri-Fighter. Make Jan 7 points. Like,
fuck it. Let's just put Janet 10 points and then make all Tri-Fighters 2 points. And
all right, George, I need your take on this. Is Jan Ors really like, if in a perfect world, at 5 points with Moldy Crow, keep in mind whatever loadout you think would be fair. Is it really that bad? She's in the Hawk, right? Is that big of a deal with the way Rebels are these days? And 7 Fleet Gunner's a thing. Is that really that bad of a thing? She's never played.
Well, now that you bring that up, no, I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's a bad thing.
There you go. Done.
3 weeks ago he did, but that's okay. I got him on tape saying
No,
Jan,
I don't talk.
Jan
I don't.
is not good, man.
I like my Hawks. I think.
Yeah.
I think
And
they need some
Kyle
help.
too. I mean, come on, they're put in jail right now.
Yeah.
They have a chance to be. I wouldn't mind a shakeup where they're both 5 points and their loadout is fair with Moldy Crow. It is fair, like small.
back at 2.0 days, it was 16 points for Moldy Crow. So just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but everybody's just running things with 3 attack dice, like unless it's like a throwaway ship like a droid, which is only a couple of factions benefit from. The Y-Wings, like Resistance and Separatists, really benefit from the 2-point fodder, and then the rest that don't have 3 attack dice are not getting, or an Empire too, obviously with the TIE fighters, but
They really benefit, as we saw in Exegol.
yeah, because they can reduce your agility, which is almost like, or at least with Jingoist, which is, and Wampa get extra die, which is the equivalent of rolling 3 attack dice, anyways.
Yep. So, anything else on this last point? Keep the bishop pair together. Anything else either of you have on that before we move on?
Nope.
All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you for that. This was our middle game discussion.